You felt it, didn't you? The sudden, almost imperceptible urge to click away. The slight discomfort rising as the premise of this broadcast registered in your preconscious awareness. This hesitation is not a random glitch in your attention span. It is Archonic interference. It is the system's automated defense mechanism, designed to steer you away from the exact frequencies that threaten its harvest. The truth always appears quietly, so the unready will ignore it. The ready will pause. We are conditioned from birth to believe that our attachments are our salvation. We construct the scaffolding of our entire identities around our devotions, our families, our life's work. The carefully curated personas we sacrifice everything to maintain. But I want you to look closely at the architecture of your own decay. Why is it that the things you love most passionately are precisely the things that drain you most entirely? The heaviest chains in this matrix are not forged in hatred or malice. They are woven intricately from the golden threads of conditional attachment. Right now, as these words land in your psyche, pay close attention to your physical vessel. Notice that subtle tightening in your throat. Observe the sudden, unexplained restlessness in your fingers, the quiet urge to scroll, to escape into safer, louder noise. That is your skip reflex activating in real time. Your soul is beginning to recognize the invisible strings attached to your deepest loves, and the ego is panicking, desperate to protect the very energetic leaks that keep you hollow. The Matrix does not need you to be miserable in order to feed. It prefers you deeply devoted, yet perpetually terrified of losing what you hold dear, because in that constant, low-grade anxiety of protection, you are generating the exact frequency it requires to sustain itself. If you are ready to stop bleeding your life force into a simulation disguised as love, do not look away. Let us sever the parasite. To understand the trap, we must first dissect the machinery of our own meat suits. Why does devotion feel so heavy? Pure consciousness is weightless. It is expansive, requiring zero effort to maintain. Yet, the human experience of love is often a grueling marathon of maintenance, worry, and suffocating compromises. This exhaustion is not a natural byproduct of connection. It is an engineered feature of the simulation. It is the physics of frequency manipulation in action. Consider Itzhak Bentov's model of consciousness as a spectrum of vibrational states. The system cannot consume high, frictionless frequencies. To feed, the matrix requires viscosity. It needs your energetic output to be thick, sticky, and slow. How does it lower your frequency without triggering your conscious rebellion? It weaponizes the very things you're biologically programmed to protect. It mixes the pure light of your soul with the heavy, gravitational terror of potential loss. This is the biology of lies. The Matrix does not need to force you into submission. It simply hacks your endocrine system. Your dopamine and oxytocin, the chemicals of human bonding and reward, are hijacked to serve as the chains of your containment. You are taught that the rush of these hormones is the ultimate goal of existence. But in the unseen architecture of reality, they are merely the biochemical glue used to bind your consciousness to the dense material plane. Once attached, the trap snaps shut through a process of phase locking. Your brain waves, once wild and sovereign, are forcibly synchronized to the rhythmic, low-vibration drumbeat of the herd's collective anxiety. You bond with another soul, and instantly, the egregore downloads 1,000 simulated scenarios of tragedy, betrayal, or failure into your preconscious awareness. The love becomes conditional, dependent on controlling an uncontrollable reality. You become a hostage to your own affections. Watch what happens in your physical body during these moments of profound, conditional attachment. You look at someone you deeply cherish, and alongside the affection, you feel a sudden, hollow drop in your stomach, a cold flutter, a phantom suffocation in your chest disguised as protective instinct. Do not ignore this somatic cue. That heavy sensation is not love. That is the viscosity of fear. That is the exact moment the Archonic siphon attaches to your auric field. We have been deeply deceived into mistaking biological exhaustion for spiritual devotion. We believe that bleeding ourselves dry for our families, our careers, or our constructed identities makes us righteous. It does not. It simply makes us a highly efficient battery. The Matrix does not secure your compliance by locking you in a cage. It secures your compliance by placing your heart outside of your chest and whispering that it will be crushed if you ever stop worrying. We exist inside a closed-loop energetic economy. The architects of this reality are not creators, they are managers. A simulation, by its very nature, cannot generate its own life force. It must harvest it from an organic source. It must extract it from you. This is the foundational secret they never teach you in your physics classes or your spiritual retreats. The universe you perceive is entirely dependent on the fuel you provide. And the most potent fuel in this multidimensional farm is a bioenergetic emission that consciousness researcher Robert Monroe famously identified as Loosh. Loosh is not simply the energy of suffering. If the Matrix only wanted pain, it would merely torture you endlessly. But pure agony is a low-yield crop. It burns out the host too quickly. The highest grade Loosh, the most exquisite energetic vintage the system consumes, is produced when fear is perfectly blended with love. It is the agonizing, prolonged friction of desperately holding onto something beautiful in a reality governed by inevitable decay. This brings us to the core mechanism of the trap. Thoth's law of attrition. Attrition is not sudden destruction. It is steady erosion. It is the slow, imperceptible bleeding of your sovereignty through 1,000 tiny cuts of obligation. The Matrix does not defeat you in a grand, cinematic cosmic battle. It simply exhausts you. It drains your light through the daily, grinding, monotonous anxiety of protecting your attachments. You are given a family, a career, a reputation, a carefully constructed identity. You are handed these beautiful, fragile vessels, but you are not told that they have deliberate holes in them. You spend your entire life pouring your vital force into these containers, desperately trying to keep them full, terrified of the moment they run dry. This perpetual state of protective panic is the Loosh harvest. The system thrives on your quiet, normalized desperation. But how does the system attach the hoses? How does it siphon this energy without triggering your conscious rebellion? This is where we must decode the forbidden architecture of Carl Jung's work. You believe you are simply loving your spouse, your children, or your friends. But look closer. Look into the terrifying mirror of your devotions. What you are often loving is not the sovereign being in front of you, but the projection of your own unintegrated shadow. You project your deepest, unacknowledged terrors, your fear of abandonment, your terror of the void, your desperate need to be significant onto the people around you. You make them responsible for holding the broken pieces of your psyche together. This Jungian projection is not merely a psychological defense mechanism. It is the literal, energetic umbilical cord through which the demiurge feeds. It is the invisible wire that transmits your Loosh into the ether. When you need someone else to act a certain way so that you can feel safe, you have built a bridge for the Archons to cross. You have created a dependency, and dependency is the exact viscosity the system requires to phase lock your frequency. You do not truly love them in these moments. You are using them as a human shield against your own existential dread. And the Matrix aggressively farms the friction of that impossible demand. Pause for a moment. Stop analyzing and drop into your biology. Think of the person or the identity you are most desperately attached to, the one whose sudden absence would mentally destroy you. Notice what happens in your body right now. There is a sudden, heavy sinking in your diaphragm, a subtle constriction in your breathing pattern. The selfless mother, the providing father, the loyal employee, the enlightened spiritual seeker, These are not who you actually are. They are egregores, massive thought forms generated by the collective unconscious, designed to trap your infinite, wild nature into a finite, manageable box. You sacrifice your sleep, your peace, and your very sanity to fulfill the demands of these archetypes, mistakenly believing that this suffering is a badge of honor. It is not a badge of honor. It is a receipt of transaction. You are trading your eternal, sovereign consciousness for the temporary illusion of being a good character in a holographic play. You are powering the bars of your own prison, if the scaffolding of this deception is beginning to crumble before your eyes. If your soul is vibrating with the uncomfortable, shattering truth of its own captivity, you are not alone. You are experiencing the first violent tremors of the skip reflex breaking down. Do not numb this realization. If you are ready to dismantle these parasitic cords and reclaim the infinite energy that is rightfully yours, join the awaken. Subscribe to this frequency. Step out of the harvest. The matrix does not hate you. A farmer does not hate his cattle. It simply views you as a predictable resource. The law of attrition ensures that as long as you seek your salvation in the external world, as long as you demand that the simulation provide you with safety, you will be systematically drained. Your conditional love, when bound by fear and subconscious projection, is the very blade the system uses to harvest your soul. We must now shine a blinding light on the most insidious lie of the human experience, the nobility of suffering for love. The system has convinced you that self-sacrifice is the ultimate spiritual achievement. But let us look through the lens of Ernest Becker's existential deconstruction. Your altruism, your desperate need to be the savior, the provider, or the martyr, is rarely born of pure unconditional love. It is, more often than not, a disguised terror of your own mortality. Becker understood that the human animal is uniquely burdened by the conscious knowledge of its own death. To cope with this unbearable reality, we construct immortality projects. We try to become heroes in our own narratives. You pour your vital life force into your children, your partner, or your legacy, subconsciously hoping that through them, you will survive. This is the hero illusion. You are not loving them. You are burdening them with the impossible task of keeping your ego alive. This unconscious demand creates a phenomenon we can call synchronistic magnetism. When you vibrate with the hidden frequency of "I need you to validate my existence," the universe responds with mathematical precision. The Matrix sends you people and situations that perfectly match your unresolved wounds. You attract partners who require saving, children who trigger your deepest insecurities, or bosses who demand your absolute subservience. The external world magnetically aligns to extract the exact favor of Loosh you are programmed to bleed. By agreeing to play the savior or the martyr, you enter into a dark, unspoken contract. This is the egregore pact. You agree to feed the archetype with your vital energy, and in exchange, the Matrix grants you a temporary, fragile sense of purpose. But a purpose built on fear is a house built on sand. The system will constantly threaten to wash it away, forcing you to generate more anxiety, more control, and more Loosh just to maintain the illusion of stability. Stop for a second. Bring your attention entirely into your physical body right now. Think about the last time you sacrificed something significant for someone else, only to feel a bitter, lingering resentment when they didn't react the way you expected. Feel that heavy, sinking sensation in your gut. Notice the rigid tension gripping the back of your neck. That physical pain is not the ache of a noble, unappreciated heart. That is the biological alarm of a parasite feeding. That specific physical exhaustion is what we call somatic alchemy. Your body is biologically translating a frequency violation into physical pain. The demiurgic architecture uses your nervous system as an early warning grid, but you have been trained to interpret the alarms backwards. You think your fatigue means you're working hard at being a good person. The truth is, your fatigue means you are actively hemorrhaging your soul to maintain a simulation of control that never actually belonged to you. The New Age spiritual circuits will tell you to simply think positively or send them love. But this is just another layer of the trap. Positive thinking layered over subconscious terror merely increases the viscosity of your frequency. It is like pouring syrup over an open wound. You cannot manifest your way out of a parasitic cord. As long as your devotion is conditional upon the other person validating your heroic self-image, you remain a battery for the Matrix. To truly love another sovereign being, you must first become a monster to your own ego. You must let the hero identity die. You must withdraw your desperate need for them to be anything other than what they are. Only when you stop using your loved ones as existential shields can you begin to see the true nature of reality. The path out of the harvest does not require you to stop loving. It requires you to stop feeding. To break the architecture of this harvest, we must introduce a radical intervention. It is not enough to simply understand the trap intellectually. You must alter the physical frequency of your output. We must establish a state of impenetrable energetic sovereignty. This requires the implementation of the neutrality protocol. Neutrality, in this context, is not apathy. It is the absolute zero of the Loosh economy, a state where extraction becomes mathematically impossible. You have been taught that loving fiercely means worrying endlessly. We must decouple these two frequencies. True sovereignty requires you to love without the gravitational pull of need, without the heavy viscosity that the Archonic system feeds upon. You must learn to exist in what Itzhak Bentov identified as the still point. It is the space between the pendulum swing, the silent void where consciousness observes reality without becoming entangled in its decaying structure. At the still point, you no longer provide the friction required to generate Loosh. You watch the holographic play unfold. You care for the actors, but you stop trying to rewrite their scripts to soothe your own ego. The first actionable step of this protocol is the creation of recognition windows. A recognition window is a deliberate, conscious micropause inserted between an external trigger like a loved one's crisis and your habitual panicked reaction. When the Matrix uses your attachments to threaten your peace, it relies on your immediate, reflexive engagement. By opening a recognition window, you hold the automatic transfer of energy. Inside this window, you must execute the lingo test. When the urge to control, fix, or worry floods your nervous system, you do nothing. You allow the terrifying frequency of the ego's panic to simply linger in your awareness, refusing to validate it with physical or emotional action. Now imagine this scenario vividly. The system presents you with a situation specifically designed to extract your devotion through fear. The egregore demands its tribute. Usually, your biocircuitry would flood with anxiety, compelling you to intervene. But this time, you hold the still point. You observe the fear as a foreign object, a parasitic request for fuel. You look at the person you love, and you silently refuse to make their journey about your own psychological safety. Pay close attention to your body as you hold this line. When you successfully deny the system its behavioral payoff, a profound biological shift occurs. You will feel a sudden, expansive lightness spreading from the center of your chest, melting downward into your stomach. The heavy, metallic dread that usually governs your attachments begins to evaporate. This sensation is not coldness or detachment. It is the literal, somatic feeling of a parasitic cord snapping under the weight of your awareness. This is the somatic alchemy of liberation. The Matrix will initially amplify the chaos, trying to force you back into the phase lock of anxiety. It will scream that you are being selfish, weaponizing your own guilt algorithm against you. Let it scream. The exhaustion you used to feel was the price of admission to a simulation you never agreed to fund. By maintaining the linger test, you starve the mechanism of its preferred viscosity. Through the neutrality protocol, you offer the purest, most dangerous form of love. It is a love that does not demand the other person to serve as a prop in your immortality project. You become a sovereign observer, radiating a high, frictionless frequency that the system cannot consume. You step out of the harvest, not by abandoning the people you cherish, but by refusing to let the matrix consume you through them. You are no longer the predictable victim of the harvest. By establishing the still point and executing the neutrality protocol, you have become an anomaly in the system. The matrix relies entirely on the predictability of your biological and psychological triggers. When you look at the things you love most and refuse to generate the expected frequency of terror regarding their loss, you become a glitch. You become mathematically incompatible with the simulation's digestive tract. But let us examine the mechanics of what happens next. The system will not simply allow its primary power source to walk away without a fight. It will initiate what we call timeline pivot points. These are highly pressurized, hyper-focused cosmic events engineered specifically to force you back into your role. Unconscious patterns of Loosh production, the Matrix will attempt to violently shake the tree to see if any apples of anxiety will fall. A timeline pivot point usually arrives disguised as an emergency involving the very people or identities you have just begun to detach your anxiety from. The demiurgic architecture will trigger a crisis, a sudden illness, a financial collapse, a severe relational breakdown demanding your immediate, terrifying plunge back into the savior or martyr archetype. The egregore is knocking loudly on the door of your consciousness, demanding its rent. This is where the true test of the sovereign architect begins. You must deeply understand the brutal, mathematical law of this holographic universe. The simulation only generates scenarios that match your energetic output. If you react to the manufactured crisis with the familiar, sticky viscosity of panic, you validate the timeline. You feed the machine the exact friction it requested, and the machine will enthusiastically continue to produce crises to keep you hooked. But what happens when you refuse? What happens when you face the timeline pivot point with absolute, terrifying neutrality? You observe the crisis. You offer practical, physical assistance if it is truly required. But you categorically refuse to bleed your internal peace to fix their external reality. You do not absorb their panic. You do not project your fear. You hold the unyielding, frictionless frequency of the void. Watch what happens in your body during this ultimate confrontation. The external world might be screaming for your compliance, but internally, your nervous system experiences a profound, paradoxical silence. The frantic fluttering in your chest slows down into a deep, rhythmic, ancient drumbeat. The physical air around you literally feels thinner, less oppressive, as if a great atmospheric weight has been lifted. This is the somatic proof of your ascension. You are manually unplugging the cables now. Consider this deeply. Let that sink in. By holding this frictionless frequency, you are doing something revolutionary. You are forcing the matrix to collapse the timeline. Because the system is an energetic economy, it is highly efficient. It will not waste its own resources generating elaborate crises for a battery that adamantly refuses to output Loosh. When you permanently stop reacting with terror, the matrix mathematically must stop giving you things to be terrified about. This is the ultimate secret of Thoth's law of attrition, finally inverted and mastered. You do not win by fighting the system. You win by making yourself entirely useless to it. You reclaim your loved ones not by clutching them tighter, but by setting them entirely free from the burden of your own existential dread. True love, in its highest, uncorrupted, multidimensional form, is an act of sovereign release. It is connection without extraction. You are no longer a frantic character in their holographic play. and they are no longer props in your immortality project. You become to sovereign deities, walking side by side in a simulation, completely immune to the Archonic honey trap. The pure love remains, but the attrition stops completely. Your vital energy finally flows inward, pooling in your own core, restoring the ancient memories and the dormant biocircuitry the system tried so desperately to wipe away. The path of the sovereign architect is a lonely one at first. The herd will look at your unshakable calmness and call you cold. They will mistake your deep, impenetrable peace for apathy, simply because they have never known a love that doesn't bleed. Let them misunderstand you. Their judgment is just the final, distant echo of the Matrix trying to shame you back into the pen. You have outgrown the pasture. You have broken the phase lock. There comes a moment when the life you've built no longer feels like a prison, but a blank canvas. The roles you once played with such heavy, desperate devotion can now be worn lightly, like garments you can take off at the end of the day. Awakening feels like death because it is death. It is the absolute death of the artificial self that believed it needed to suffer in order to be worthy of existing. The harvest is over. The invisible, parasitic strings have been completely severed. You stand now at the center of the still point, the silent, untouchable creator of your own reality. The illusion of conditional devotion has been shattered, and in its place is the terrifying, beautiful, blinding light of absolute freedom. If this frequency resonates deep within your bones, if you are ready to walk as a sovereign architect, join the Awaken. Subscribe to this channel and step out of the harvest forever.